thank you so much for joining me today. This video is my first update for my eyeshadow rotation project pan. I think that's just what I'm going to call it. I'm not going to try to come up with another name. I think eyeshadow rotation project pan is exactly what it is. Gets right to the point. It's simple but effective. This project is kind of my sequel to the Pan Those Eyeshadows project that I'd been doing for a couple years, where I was randomly generating 5 shades and trying to hit pan on them. This one is a little bit more balanced. It ensures that I'm able to reach for all of my palettes equally and still gives me at least a little bit more control over the shades I'll be working on than the Pan Those Eyeshadows project did. For January, I was focusing on my oldest and my newest palette, my oldest being the Colored Raine Queen of Hearts palette, and my newest being the Rose Quartz palette from Huda Beauty. I will talk about those palettes, the looks I created, how many times I reached for each, my general thoughts, etc. And then I'll show you the 2 palettes that I have chosen for February. So let's get started. I'm going to focus first on the Queen of Hearts palette. This one I used 6 times in the past month. I do have one video that goes much more in depth in all of the shades, how each of the shades performs. I do swatches, both finger and brush swatches, and I did 5 looks with this palette a couple years ago, so I will have that either in the cards or in the description box if you want like a more in-detail review of this palette. I watched that video again and pretty much everything in that video is the same, and I remember even in that video being a little bit disappointed that this Princess shade here, which seems to be more of like a mauvey cool tone purple, definitely pulls a lot more peachy brown on my skin tone. I don't know if it's because of my undertones or what, but this just never looks like this on my eyes. And I kind of feel the same about Royal Highness. I guess I just hope that Royal Highness is going to have a little bit more purple in it than it does, but on my eyes it pulls a little bit more neutral. And even though I used to be so obsessed with purples and oranges back in the day, it's not really my style so much anymore. And if I am going to do a purple, it's going to be like a taupey cool tone purple like what I'm wearing on my eyes today. I do still very much like this palette, but it's not the absolute best palette in my collection anymore. Other formulas, other color stories have come in. Also, my personal tastes have changed as well since I purchased this. I think I've had this since 2018, so it's 3 or 4 years old at this point. I think those types of changes are very natural, and no one palette has really been able to stand the test of time in that way, which is perfectly understandable. I feel like that's a little bit too much to ask for just one palette. I'm really glad I was able to focus and dip back into this palette and give it some more time to really remember what I liked about this palette so much, but I am ready to put it away and focus on my next 2 palettes for February. Next, for Rose Quartz from Huda Beauty, I used this one 11 times, and this one I have just fallen more and more in love with it as I use it more. I am really glad that I was able to dip into it right after purchasing it, because I feel like a lot of people are talking about this palette right now, and I am glad to be able to give a more thorough review on my thoughts. I do still feel like some of the shimmers are a little bit crumbly, and so they do require a little bit more precision when you're applying them wet, making sure you're able to clean up the under eyes, etc. Like some of them just have fallout that is hard to swipe off. But the payoff and the way they look on my eyes is really special and pretty, so I am willing to overlook it. The mattes are really beautiful, and I just really love this color story. I am doing a 3 looks 1 palette video with this palette. I've done the first 2 looks already, and one of them is with Cosmic Love. The other one is this one I'm wearing today, which is my purpley cool toned gray taupe look. And I do want to do a 3rd look, but I'm not entirely sure where I want to go with it. So if you have a specific shade in here that you think I should focus on for look number 3, please let me know in the comments. There are a lot of shades in here that I think initially I would have overlooked, and then whenever I did get a chance to go in and focus on them, I was very pleasantly surprised. I can't really think of any shade in here that was disappointing to me or didn't work, or I wasn't able to find a way to make it work. Even this Love Stone shade here, which is like that cream that has like little pebbles of pigment in it that you break over time, I was even able to find a way to use that, and even though it's not my favorite thing in the world, I'm not really like a cream shadow type of person, I was still able to make it work. I really did think that this was going to be like a dud that I'd never be able to use. The packaging is gorgeous on top of that. These are the types of shades I gravitate towards anyway, and I'm just really loving this palette, and I love it even more after having used it 11 times. And then I did pull one single shadow to go with those 2 palettes, and that was the Essence Melted Chrome eyeshadow in the shade Zinc About You, which is kind of a frosty light pinky silver. I used this one 4 times, which is 4 times more than I've used it probably in the past 6+ months. And it's a shame I just kind of forget about it because it's in its own separate package and it sits with my other singles. Just kind of forget it exists. So I was glad to pull it out, and I think it did go well with the 2 palettes that I was working with. I do feel like it's a little bit drier than it used to be, which is completely understandable. It's a creamy shadow. I think it is like a cream formula. I don't think it's just a powder shadow. I think there's some element of cream to it. It is a very frosty shade and I think it's beautiful. I'm glad I have it. So now let's look at my favorite looks that I created. I do really like the looks I was able to make with these. I have 8 to show you and only 2 of them are featuring the Queen of Hearts palette, but I would like to point out again that I do have a 5 looks 1 palette video already with this palette. So if you want more looks from this one in particular, I do already have a video with that. So the first 2 looks I'm going to share are with the Queen of Hearts palette. The first look was a little bit more bronzy, a little bit more natural. I used Crown, which is that white duochrome with a little bit of a peach flip to it on the inner corner. I used Princess in the crease, Royal Highness, which is that taupey shimmer all over the lid, and then I used Royal Prerogative, which is that darker brown to deepen the crease a little bit. I think this was a really great simple look. The next one I wanted to focus more on like the golds and the warm browns, so I have Royal Prerogative in the crease. I mixed it with Air just to make it a little bit lighter, and then I used Dethrone, which is that dark brown on the outer corner. I used Your Majesty, which is that beautiful gold shimmer all over the lid, and then again I used Crown on the inner corner. I love using Crown on the inner corner. I love using duochromes because I think they really have a chance to show like both the base color and the flip. I think just the way you turn your head, it'll show like something slightly different. I haven't really used warm golds on my lids for a while, and I was glad to have a chance to go back and do that again. Now the rest of the looks are featuring the Huda Beauty palette. The first one I used a lot of shades. It probably doesn't even look that complicated on my lids, like it probably looks like I used 2 or 3 shades, but I ended up using 6 shades. I mixed Gratitude and Precious. Gratitude is a warmer brown, Precious is a cooler gray, so I mixed those together to put them in my crease. Then I used Mantra, which is a dark matte grayish brown. I used that on the outer thirds. I used Energized, which is a golden taupe shimmer shade all over the lid, and then I topped it with Blissful to add a little bit more interest to that color. And then I used Moon Magic, which is a beautiful, really light duochrome, like purple blue shifty shade. I used that on the inner corner. I really liked this look. I thought it was pretty, and it was just fun to play with those shimmers a little bit. The next look I focused on the pinks. I had just added a lot of red and burgundy to my hair, and I wanted to create something that matched that a little bit better. So I used Cherish, which is that really light pinky white shade, to go all over my lid, and then I used Happiness, which is a Barbie pink matte shade, and I used that all over the crease. I went and mixed Serenity and Precious. Precious again is that slate matte shade, and Serenity is a cool tone purple. I mixed those together to deepen the crease a little bit more. And then I used Joy, which is a shimmery Barbie pink all over the lid. I added Self Love, which is that marbled shade that has a little bit of white and then a little bit of gold and a little bit of pink. I used that just to add a little bit of something brighter to the inner third of the lid, and then I went and used Moon Magic again in the inner corner. I think that is a beautiful inner corner shade. For look number 5, I added a third little picture in there because I wanted you to see what it looked like in the inner corners. I used Moon Magic again in the inner corner, but I brought it up to the brow bone. And again, I used Cherish to set my lid. I used a mixture of Happiness, which is that Barbie bubblegum pink matte, with Precious, which is that slate gray. And then I used Mantra, which is that really dark gray brown shade on the outer third. And then on the lid as my shimmer shade, I used Think About You from Essence, which is that little single. And I really liked this all together. It kind of gave like a galaxy vibe. I think the majority of my Huda looks looked a lot more complicated, a lot more special in person. I think they weren't really captured on camera the way they looked in real life. Now let's move on to the next look. This was just a 1 shade look. I used Radiate, which is kind of a neutral leaning cool brown. Like it has just a slightly cooler undertone, but it's not necessarily a gray. It has a little bit of purple in it, and I just used that all over the lid and on the lower lash line. And I really did like having a simple matte look that was really easy to pair with anything. It's a beautiful shade. I really enjoyed it, but definitely like a very simple look. And the next look is also a one eyeshadow look. I used a glitter glue from NYX all over the lid, and then I packed Cosmic Love on top, and this was stunning. This is one of the 3 looks that I'm featuring in that 3 looks 1 palette video, so if you'd like to see how I got this look, I will have a tutorial coming soon. Beautiful, stunning, loved it. This is a shade that I didn't really look at in the palette whenever I first was trying to determine what shades I wanted to play with first. This one kind of like wasn't on my radar, and then whenever I went in to try it out, it just very much surprised me, and now it's one of my favorite shades in the palette. So just goes to show you, if you are the type of person who doesn't like wearing blue eyeshadow but you do want to try it, I think using something like this that has that multi-dimensional effect and only has a little bit of blue but also has other shades in there as well, I think this is a really great way to do that. And the very last one was my most pastel-y, springy type of look. I used Lovestone, which is that cream shade, all over the lid, and then I packed Cherish on top. And I think having that creamier base really helped that shade like show a lot more pigment. It's not the most pigmented shade because it is like very white based, and it is very close to my skin tone already, just a little bit more pink. So when I put it all over the lid with just a fluffy brush, it doesn't have the most payoff, but whenever you pack it on top of a cream shade, I feel like it really pops and brightens up the lid. So I thought that was really, really pretty. And then I used a little bit of Self Love, which is that white, pinky, gold light shade, light shimmer shade. I just put that on the inner corners just to add a little bit more brightness there. And then I used a heavier liner. If you don't like these types of looks where like the entire lid is super light, maybe you have more hooded lids or you just want more dimension, you could totally put something in the crease to deepen it up and add a little bit of a difference there. But whenever I had it on, I thought maybe I should add something to the crease, but then I kind of liked how brightening it was and how it did just fill up the whole lid like that, so I kept it. Once again, I will have a 3 looks 1 palette video with that Huda Beauty palette, but if you do have a specific look or a couple shades that you think I should use for my 3rd look, please let me know. So now let's announce the 2 palettes that I'm going to be focusing on in February. And yes, I did want to have the opportunity to create more pinky or red burgundy looks, very appropriate for the Valentine's Day coming up in February, but in general I wanted palettes that would be able to help me create very romantic looks in general. So the first palette that I knew I wanted to pick for February was the Enduring Love palette from Sydney Grace. The quality is so top-notch. This palette is criminally underused in my collection, and I just knew I wanted to bring it out because it does have those beautiful pinks in there, and it does have some other really beautiful soft glam shades, both cool and neutral undertones. I feel like there's a lot that I can do with this palette, and I really wanted a chance to play with this a little bit more. I think this is a great palette for like this time of year. And then of course I couldn't let February go by without using my She's All That palette from ColourPop. This one is definitely the one that reminds me the most of Valentine's Day. It has a beautiful mixture of pinks and reds and burgundies, and again, I don't reach for this palette enough. Every time I do, I always really love it, so I'm definitely going to be pulling this out this month as well. And if I do feel like I need some other shades to help ground this look or keep it from getting too red, I could definitely use the mattes that I have in here. And alternatively, if I do want to use some of the shimmer shades from here but I want more of a burgundy reddish undertone, I can pull into this palette, or I could just create palettes with these independently. I won't be pulling out any singles for this month. I am just going to focus on those 2 palettes, but someone in my introduction video brought up a very fun idea, and that was to randomly generate 1 shade from each palette to try to use a certain number of times, kind of to bring back in that like pan those eyeshadows randomness fun aspect to the project. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm pulling out my Pretty Random number generator app, which I have not done in months and months, probably like not since May of last year, so it's been 8+ months since I pulled it out. I actually couldn't even remember the name of the app when I was preparing for this video. I had to go through all of my apps just to remember what it's called. And I think what I'll try to do this month is whichever shade I generate from each palette, I'm going to try to use that shade in particular 5 times. I'm going to keep the goal relatively low just because I'm not sure what the month is going to bring. I mean, I never really do, but I don't want to like have a really lofty goal and make myself feel like I have to only focus on those shades. The purpose of the project is to try to use the entire palette. So the Enduring Love palette has 15 shades, so I'll make the minimum 0 and the maximum 15. And I'll just have it where I go across, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through 10, 11 through 15. And the shade that I'm going to try to use 5 times from this palette is number 8. Which isn't like the most exciting shade, but it is pretty good. It's this shade here, Passion, right in the center of the palette. This is a matte shade and it is very cool toned and gray, has a little bit of a purple tint to it as well. For the She's All That palette, this one has 12 shades, so I changed the maximum, and the shade I'm going to choose from that palette is number 4, which is the shade Risque. This is a really light, kind of champagne-y, shimmery shade. It's got a little bit of a pinkness to it. Not exactly the most like exciting shades from the palettes, but I am excited to have like at least something to focus on. Maybe if I'm in a bit of a rush in the morning and I don't exactly know what I want to put together, I don't have time to really put together a well thought out look, I'll have 2 shades that I know I can kind of default to. So again, I don't want to put any extra restrictions or rules on the palettes. I am just going to try to keep these in my everyday makeup drawer. If I want to use another palette, I can, but I'm going to try to focus on these. And again, I will be sharing my favorite looks that I created with these next month as well. Do you have any interest in me doing like an eyeshadow bingo with either of these palettes? Or I could do an eyeshadow bingo with them together. I don't know how useful a 3 looks 1 palette video would be for either of these because they are somewhat older palettes and there are so many videos like that out there already created by people with a lot more talent than me. But I still think it'd be fun to do an eyeshadow bingo either with these palettes individually or together. So that is everything I have for my update. Again, if there's anything that you think I should add to this project to make it more fun or even just more interesting to watch, please let me know. But in the meantime, that's everything I have. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.